Okay, now let's talk about some of the documentation and some couple of things. So I have already released beta version and the APKs. You can download it from here, or you can open this GitHub URL, click on the link here. It will directly start downloading, or you can go to this releases, go to tags and open the beta one, not this one alpha. I'll delete this alpha because it has couple of issues. And second thing is the backend repo is this one. It is a fairly simple uh, typescript type, JavaScript type functions which gets triggered from uh, Flutter. I will also talk about that in this documentation. And as you can see, I have also made table of contents. So these things I have already mentioned in my uh, proposal also, that why I'm using Firebase because of these things. Now let's talk about some features. So user authentication and management. As you can see, these are the screens for user authentication and management. I'm using OTP based authentication. Once the user is authenticated, they can create either a new profile if they are the first time, or they can modify existing details. Like for example, the details will be fetched here and they will be, and they can also click on challenge to set up the new challenge here. Once once it's done, uh, this device ID is generated and stored on Cloud Firestore along with all the data. Why device ID is essential? Because Firebase Cloud Messaging uses this device ID to send the notifications. How I'm using phone number validation, on device validation, like for example, and country code. I'm using this library Flutterlip phone number, which is a very good library. Uh, it validates that phone numbers are in correct format for every country. For example, Indian numbers have 10 digits, Australian numbers have 9 digits, uh, and so forth. This library checks the country code you have selected, the number must be in that range, and it also formats the number. You don't need to add any space, it will automatically add spaces, or whatever that country's phone number looks like. And once this is the uh, OTP UI, I'm using Pinput package, which is a very beautiful package, and we can make custom animations. And I have customized the UI according to our app UI. And as you can see, I'm using 123456 OTP because I have already added my number as a test number and have set the default OTP. And you also seen that the user images are stored in Firebase storage. Now let's talk about authentication flow quickly. User logs in with phone number, Firebase sends an OTP only on Blaze plan. I have already added Blaze plan. I have provided my credit card details because Blaze plan is required for two things: phone authentication and also cloud functions only works on Blaze plan. So I needed to get the Blaze plan. I have already done that. If OTP is valid, then user is authenticated. Now the first time users are prompted to add profile details, and returning user they can update, modify, save back, and device ID. It will also get generated once user press next, and then it will also get stored online along with other details. Once authentication management is done, next part is notification management. First, default screen is home screen, which has two parts: app contacts and non-app contacts. And As you can see, these are app contacts, these are non-app contacts. How it works, I'm using Flutter contacts package to read all the contacts stored in the local device. Once the app is launched, it retrieves and display the complete list of contacts, which is then divided into two categories: app contacts, contacts which have already made account on our app, and other contacts who have not yet signed up for our app. It fetches Firebase data from Firebase and then filters accordingly which contacts have registered. We can also use pull to refresh, or we can also manually refresh. This also gracefully handles any contact related error if there is no contact on device, and if there is no contact on Firebase, or if there is a error fetching any contact from Firebase. This functionality logic is already done very gracefully, and it checks all the errors. A little bit about tab functionality, what this app contacts tab means, what will be the interaction. And if you tap on any contact, it will initiate the notification sending flow. Non-cap, this shows who are not yet registered. Invite button is next to every non-contact app. You can send SMS to invite to make contact on our app using URL launcher SMS scheme. Now, what is the notification sending flow? Now, this is a tricky and interesting part, because it depends on accessing other device do not disturb status. So, how I'm using, when a user taps on app contact, it then triggers a callable function in Firebase Cloud Functions. Then that callable cloud function then sends a silent notification to the recipient's device to determine their DND status. Now, depending on the DND status, appropriate notifications are then sent. So, this is the first point. Second point, first point is fairly simple, calling a callable function in Firebase from Flutter. Very simple process. Second thing, checking the DND status. Now there was no package, so I made my own package since there was no available Flutter package for checking DND status in Android. So I created Focus Status package. This package currently only supports Android. I have done some Swift iOS part, but not yet completed. But Android is done. It utilizes Kotlin for the native. This is the Kotlin implementation. Uh, in the package, it returns integer. Uh, it is using notification manager, and it returns what is the current interruption filter. Is it 0? It is 1. It is 2. 0 means something, 1 means something, etc. etc. What does it means? You can click on this link, and this is official Android documentation, and it will tell what 0 means, what 1 means. And now once it sends on Flutter side, it uses platform channel to call this function and receives its data. See, it's awaiting. Once it's received, it also returns the int. It can also be null, as you can see the question mark. And this is how you can use my package. This package is not yet available on pub.dev because I haven't published it yet. You can directly, which I'm using in my case in my app, you can go to the GitHub of that package and use this or copy paste this directly to your pubspec.yaml. So once the DND status is like retrieved from the recipient device using this whole etc scenario, there are three main potential scenarios. First is we are unable to get the DND status, something happened with device, etc. etc. This value returns null or something else. Then if the app cannot retrieve the DND status, a notification is then again in the sender is shown notification that there was an error and they can try again later. Second thing, receiver not in DND mode. That is fairly simple. If the recipient is not in DND mode, a notification is sent to the receiver and that indicated that they have an urgent message. The sender also gets the confirmation notification that their message has been successfully delivered only after once the message has been delivered. Now, the third scenario, which is the tricky part of the app, which is the main mode of the app, that if the recipient is in DND mode, the app sends a challenge to the sender. The challenge can be very simple or complex, depends on how recipient has set the challenge, and the sender must solve it. Upon successful verification of the challenge, the second step receives, but this time it will bypass the DND and recipient will get the notification and sender will also get the notification. And now how the notifications are handled. I'm using awesome notification package, which is a which works very well with Firebase messaging package, which is used for sending remote push notifications. I have also used Flutter local notification, but that was causing some errors. Uh, so I'm using awesome notification, which is also a very big project on pub.dev. So it handles notification in three states: foreground, background, terminated. Even the app is not open, even the app is in background and foreground I have already shown in the demo. And now let's talk about permission handling. There is also one tricky part in the permission handling thing. Permission handling is done on the permission screen.dart. There are three permissions required. As you can see, notification permissions, contacts permissions, and do not disturb permissions. Notification permissions and contact permissions are fairly simple. Notification permissions are handled by Flutter Firebase messaging, and the device contacts permissions are handled by Flutter contacts package. Now, the third thing again, whether to check the DND, like this app has permissions to bypass the DND or not. It was fairly complex because there was no direct API to check whether our app is in the DND override list or not. Users can manually, like I have also mentioned, users can manually add app to this list in their phone setting. I will show you the list. But there was no native API to check that if our app is included. But there was another thing. What was the thing? I have researched for so long, Stack Overflow and some Reddits. It was a rabbit hole, one link after the another, etc. etc. I read the whole Android documentation again and again, the notification part. Then I discovered a native API which checks, which allows checking a specific notification channel. So basically, what in short, Android doesn't provide any API to check whether the whole app has the permission to bypass the DND, but it has an API that will provide you that whether this app's notification channel has the access to bypass the DND. So what I am doing is I'm again making my own implementation in Kotlin and Flutter also. So this is the function can bypass DND which returns boolean. It get it again using notification manager. First of all, it lists all the notification channels in the user device. Then it's check this is the unique key name, that whether this can check the ID, and then that channel we can use this native function can bypass DND, and it returns true or false or null value, but it will always return false if there is a null. Now, what is the Flutter implementation again? You can see it's returning bool. It can bypass DND, this Kotlin function, and it's also logging and also returning DND or false. And how it's checking that what is this thing when we initialize our app first time with awesome notification or Flutter local notification initialization logic, we need to give the channel key. So as you can see, this is the unique identifier which is being used to detect whether this app's notification channel can bypass DND or not. So for example, one app can have multiple channels. In our use case, we only have one, but some apps like have many types of notification channels, and they have given permissions by default that these channels can bypass or not, etc., etc. Like for example, YouTube can have multiple notification channels, like one for a YouTube update, video update from your subscribed channel, one from if someone has liked your comment, etc., etc. But in our use case, we are only using one notification channel, and this logic checks whether that notification channel can bypass DND or not. This is the native API can bypass DND. So that's how the whole thing was done, and that's how I am handling the. So this is the video. Let's start from start. So once you give permission to notification, you can see this is the channel name. It's urgent notification. Scroll down, and this then override do not disturb, and then the boolean will return true. If it's off, the boolean will return false. Like for example, this is false. Off, the boolean will return false. Now it's open, the boolean will return true. So this instruction is also included in the app, like I showed in the demo. This was all this. Now, how I'm, as you can see, I am moving back and forth from app to settings app. How it's checking whether the permission has been given or not. As you can see here, I'm using widget binding observer in a stateful widget, and I am checking when the app lifecycle is resumed. Again, refresh the permissions, and it checks again whether the permissions are given. If it's permission, then user it automatically redirects to the next screen. Before this thing, I again have to manually click whether the permission was given or not. But with this thing, I think I remember in the midterm demo, Akshat was telling me that you can use this thing, uh, uh, widget binding observer, did change app lifecycle state. And because at that time I was manually checking, Akshat said we need to uh, reduce the number of clicks user does. So this thing does that. Now some couple of logistics for the app. What's the state management? As you can guess, Riverpod, which is a very pretty industrial standard. Why I'm using Riverpod? It's a very no-brainer because it's a very better approach. Why I'm using Go router? Again, it's a standard approach, but there is a there Go router was causing problems when popping dialogues. Mm, So for that, I'm using Navigator's API, navigate.offcontext.pop to close dialogues. But for screens or other thing, Go router is working fine. And how the app is handling redirection logic. So Go router has this refresh listenable, which keeps on listening to this Firebase auth state changes. If any auth state change, then it uh, triggers this redirect function. As you can see, this is a very simple example I have given here. For example, this is our Go router logic. This is the stream Go router refresh stream, and these are some routes. Let's suppose we have three routes. One is the splash screen, and first route is login screen and home screen. So first, the user is shown the splash screen. Now, if the user is logged in, once the user logs in, oh no, sorry. First, if checks if it's on splash screen, if user is null, when the app's open, the user will be null. It will redirect to login screen. Once it's on login screen, user logs in again. This will again get triggered because the auth state has changed. It will again trigger this redirect function. Now again it will run. It will check. Okay, now there is a user and the user node is null. Then it will return to home screen. This is very fair, simpler. My app's logic is fair complex, but this is very simple. If anything else happens, then we don't need to return. We don't need to redirect. No redirection needed. Normal navigation. So this is normal navigation. So, and this is a helper method provided in Go router documentation to you to convert the stream to change notifier. As you can see, this method I'm using here, what it does, it takes stream as a argument and then it converts to a change notifier. And when there is something get broadcasted to the stream, it will then notify listener. Once the listeners are notified, then the redirect logic will again trigger, and then again it will redirect according to the logic we have put down. For the splash screen, Flutter native splash package is nowadays standard. It gives us beautiful splash screens. This was pretty much the app. Now, what are the future implementations, ideas, some bugs, and some testing plans? So, future ideas. There, I was thinking of adding an action button on notifications when there is a notification. Like for example, uh, action but some we can add an action button on the notification itself. On tapping on that button, uh, the default caller app will open, and then it will also shows the number, and then user can call directly from that notification. Then they don't have to open the app and etc etc. So that was one feature I was thinking. Second is we can improve that who was our recent notifications, who have sent us how many notifications. We can keep track of all the notification related data, that this user has sent us 3 times, this user has sent us recently, etc etc. Third thing, third feature we can add is that on every contact app we can show the details, that what are their, what the name they are using on their on account, what we have entered in our device app, their phone number, etc etc. We can add more details to the individual app screen dialog, and then we can also improve our error handling. So there are, I have notified one bug, that if user adds their own phone number to the device, it appears in the app's contact tab, as you have seen in the demo. And if we click on our own app, and it will send the notification to ourselves, which we probably don't want. Nobody wants to send notification to self. So this bug needs to be resolved. It's very simple. We will filter out uh, our, our own contact from the contacts list. I haven't done that because I wanted to test notifications. So I was sending notification to myself to check whether the notification was getting delivered or not. And third thing, for future things, we can refactor some code. The edit profile screen and edit profile dialog, which are two separate things, and they use 90% of the same logic. So we can make it to one thing and we can reuse the same thing. And then the redirect logic, again, in my app is fairly complex because of there are many screens, many scenarios. We can make it much simpler, much maintainable, readable code, and many screens, which can be converted to dialogues instead, which will make our redirection logic much simpler. Again, the UI is a big UI is the uh, one thing I have learned in development that which scares the developers the most is the UI designing. I mean, I'm very bad at designing. Mm, I can copy paste a design and convert it into code and pixel perfect from design to code, but designing myself is a very tiresome task. Uh, I have created the design of this app using Material Design Toolkit on Figma. It was also a very tiresome task, but if anyone has better designs, they can improve the UI design for better. Testings, I have done manual user testing on many different devices, my friends, relatives' devices, with different phone numbers. I have done on Firebase local emulators. I haven't made account on real Firebase after uploading the functions to the real Firebase. But the Flutters itself testing, like unit testing, widget testing, i- is yet to be done because it's very tiresome task. And lastly, I don't want to leave the iOS user behind. So everything else is same. We just need to implement our own get focus status plugin, which I have already done. I have already also reading iOS references and native APIs, and also checking whether this app can bypass, or uh, uh, this channel notification channel can bypass if it's a case in the iOS. Just two things, everything else is same. It's also Fire iOS app is also edited on Firebase. Everything else is done. Just these two things, and then we can also do it on Firebase. Oh, sorry, iOS. So for the now, this section future features, and more sections are for further users or my fellow contributors who want to contribute after this project next year, or after this project is completed this year. They can start contributing. I don't know who will mentor this project, maybe Akshat, or I mentor the project next year, but let's see what happens. So for that I have made this project structure. So how the project is structured, there is a lib folder obviously, then there is a source folder. uh, main.dart is outside the source folder, it's directly under the lib folder, but everything else is then in under the source folder. Source folder is divided into two parts. One is core features, which are shared among whole app, and one are the features, which are individual features. So why I'm using feature first approach? Because I have read this article, very well written article, that why we should structure our Flutter project using feature first approach. So everything is then divided into controllers, uh, views, and models. As you can see, controllers, these are controllers, and then views and models. Controllers are usually either uh, river port dependencies injections, or so to separate, just to separate the logic, business logic from UI. Controllers models are the classes models, and views are the UI presentation layer, like the screens or the widgets. So all the authentication related controllers, views, models are here. All notification related controllers, views, and models are here. And splash screen is fairly simple, just the provider that whether the splash screen is shown to the user first or no, and then the screen itself, the views. So these are the packages I'm using. The focus status is not from the pub.dev, it's directly from the GitHub repo. That's how you use it. And these are the things.